Thank you, Speaker. I move that, in the opinion of this House, childcare should be accessible and affordable for all Ontarians, regardless if they live in urban, rural, or suburban Ontario, or what their economic circumstances are, and further, that parental choice and responsibility be respected. To accomplish that goal, the regulations accompanying the Child Care Modernization Act should allow flexibility for independent child care operators, consideration for age and own children allowances, an appeal mechanism to ensure all child care providers have equal access to due process, and that the regulatory regime allows for a fair distribution of inspectors to child care case files based on input from operators and associations.
Ms. Macleod has moved private member's notice of motion number 44. Pursuant to Standing Order 98, the member has 12 minutes for a presentation. And call.
Thank you very much, Speaker. It's my pleasure to introduce this resolution for something that I have really believed in for a number of years, starting out first as an activist and then, of course, upon entering this Assembly in 2006, and that is choice in child care. First, before I speak, Mr. Chair, I would like to recognize two people, and through them, a number of others who they have coordinated over the past year and a half as they've been confronted with challenges to independent child care operations across the province. First and most notably would be Heidi Higgins of the Independent Child Care Operators of Ontario. Heidi has created a group right across Ontario of mothers, parents, and of child care operators who are concerned with the Child Care Modernization Act and who would like to have a voice in the regulatory framework. And I know Heidi is watching at home, and Heidi, I want to say thank you on behalf of all of the parents who you are fighting for, and I want you to know that I'll continue to raise your voice and your ideas and your issues here on the floor of the Assembly. The second is a friend of mine, someone who I became very close with over the last year because of her advocacy for choice in child care. She is a mother from Oakville, someone that I don't think our paths may have ever crossed unless I became an M.P.P. and her so vocally and passionately supportive of the other parents and mothers who own in-home child care facilities. Her name is Tracy Skelton. And Tracy, throughout this process, has found her voice, a very strong voice as a passionate advocate, someone who has coordinated people throughout the province in talking about how we can best address childcare challenges in the province of Ontario. I would be remiss not to recognize the efforts of Tracy Skelton in my brief run for the leadership of my party. Tracy believed in me as I believe in her and created a group called Mums for Lisa right across Ontario. Through Tracy, I was able to meet parents not only from my own city of Ottawa, but from her city of Oakville, from Burlington, from Brampton. I met people from Thunder Bay and from Sudbury and in Belleville, right across this great province, and she opened those doors for me to meet people that had never thought they would ever be impacted by the Ontario legislature until perhaps it was too late. So to Tracy, I know you are at home and I know you are watching this while you care for the children in your home, and I want to say to you thank you from the bottom of my heart. Everything you have done for me has been meaningful, and I hope to do you justice with this issue. As I mentioned, Speaker, my record in this Assembly my record on childcare predates my visit to this Assembly. I was elected in 2006, but prior to that, in 2005, is when I had my daughter Victoria. In the 2006 federal election, it was at my daughter's own facility where my daughter went to Jamboree, where Prime Minister Stephen Harper held his choice in child care press conference to announce the first ever universal child care benefit. That was a very poignant day for me, and it was there that I recognized the need for mothers and fathers, not only across Canada, but in particular in the province of Ontario, to have choice in where they send their children for care. In 2007, I was the Children and Youth Services Critic for the Ontario Progressive Conservative Caucus, and under then leader John Tory, he tasked me with putting forward a plan. We reiterated our plan to give money directly to parents rather than to bureaucracies, because we felt it was necessary for them to have a choice in childcare as well. Through 2009 and 2010, and again through 2011 and 2013, I advocated choice in childcare again as the government plans to bring in full-day kindergarten challenged many of those agencies throughout our ridings, particularly those at the YMCAs and other areas. And again, between 2014 and now 2015, I've been talking about the Child Care Modernization Act and the impact that that has had on independent child care operators from Ottawa to Oakville, all the way to Sault Ste. Marie. I've always firmly believed that parents are responsible for their children, but they should also be respected and be allowed to choose which child care options that they feel best fits the needs of their family as well as as their child. In fact, just in today's National Post, Tasha Carradine, someone whom I've known for quite some time, probably well over 20 years, had written an op-ed about busting Canada's daycare myths. And in it, I'm not going to quote her article, but I do want to point this out because there was a study that was done. And I'm going to quote this one part, and I think then I'll talk a little bit more about my philosophy and why I think that we need to move forward with some regulatory environment that does include independent child care operators. And it says, when asked what child care they prefer, parents name themselves, followed by family members, followed by home daycare, and lastly by child care center-based care. I think that's very important to recognize, Speaker, because it does initiate a discussion in Ontario where I think that one group would like to have only center-based care and another would say, okay, give us some choices. I tend to be with more choice, and I think the best way to achieve affordable and accessible health care is by respecting parents' wishes and allowing the government to have a good regulatory environment by which to enforce the law rather than to dictate to mums and dads where they should send their child care. With Bill 10, I've often warned that we may be at risk of losing 40,000 affordable childcare spaces, predominantly, not in downtown Ottawa, not in downtown Toronto, but in suburbs, particularly growing areas like my riding of M.P.P and Carleton, and areas in the GTHA. In addition to that, because we're dealing with some of the accessibility issues, we're going to deal with affordability issues, and it's very difficult today, given high hydro prices, the increase we're going to see on our gasoline prices, to raise a child. And I think it's important that we do have a cost balance within our minds about how we can best address this. And I think if you're going to talk about childcare, you must always include independent childcare operators. Now, I know there will be some in this assembly that will point to an ombudsman's report that they neither read nor understand, and they will want to use certain quotes. But I took the time, actually, because Andre Marin, who is the ombudsman, is a constituent of mine, and throughout the, we often will meet, and I will we'll have lunch, or we'll have a meeting in my office back in Barrhaven, and we talked about childcare just before Christmas, and I said the Liberals are suggesting, for example, that you're recommending getting rid of independent child care operators. And he said, no such thing. My children have actually gone through the independent child care system. In fact, I must admit, Speaker, my daughter has as well, and I value that. And I know other members, even in the government, have used that as well. But what the Ombudsman talked about at that time, when he put forward a report on independent child care, was this. The government, particularly the Ministry of Education, was unable or unwilling, I'm not sure either, to enforce its regulations. And inspectors weren't being sent out. And as a result of that, children were put at risk. What this resolution would specifically aim to do is to have the voice of an independent child care operator sit with the minister through the regulatory framework and discuss issues that would allow all child care operators and providers to have equal access to due process, and that the regulatory regime would require a fairer distribution of inspectors to child case files. I think that's the government's role here. I think the government's role is not to tell mums and dads which child care provider they go to, but the government's role is, and it is necessarily so, the job of government to have strict regulation and strict enforcement, particularly when children are at the fore. I respect all folks' options. I know I've made a choice, my husband and I, to have our daughter, cared by two individuals. The first, she up to 0 to 6 in an in-home child care facility, and from 6 to now 10 years old and probably beyond, she's in the loving care of one of our neighbors, Myrna Hay. Myrna is in her 70s. She spent 40 years looking after the kids in my daughter's school at Manorvale Public School in Ottawa. Myrna is an institution. She's one of the most respected volunteers with our community association in the school. She's like an adopted mother to my husband and I couldn't think of anyone that would be better suited to care for our child than this woman, because I know she loves her. What concerns me about this bill is that we're telling Ontarians' mums and dads that they don't necessarily have the right to have that same choice. But again, I respect the fact that the legislature decided to move and pursue Bill 10. I respect the fact, I don't necessarily agree with it, that they turned it into law. But what I'm asking for today is some fairness for those mothers and fathers who choose the options that I've chosen and so many others have chosen, and I'm asking them to respect the independent child care operators who would like to be part of the process and part of the solution for accessible and affordable child care in our suburban, rural, and urban communities, regardless of one's income. The implications of not allowing this important voice to be heard are 40,000 child care spaces to be lost. When I visited Sudbury last fall, we heard that 1,200 local spaces in that area, in the Nickel Belt, Sudbury area, would be lost. We also heard, not too long after that, a study that cited that the most expensive childcare spaces in all of Canada were actually in Brampton, and as a result, that would even increase the cost more. So, Speaker, I don't think it's unreasonable to have early childhood educators, independent child care operators, and private daycare providers that own a center to be included in the regulatory environment and to discuss some of the issues that I have raised in this resolution. I'm seeking support from members of this Assembly. This is a resolution that must be respected because it is important that we have all voices in childcare at the table when we set the regulatory environment. I would like to say thank you to all members for indulging me in this debate so I was able to put my ideas forward. And to those at home, and I know there are many of you, as you look after your children, watching this debate, thinking you would never be involved in politics, but you are today, I want to say thank you for taking your time to becoming part of the process and understanding that the legislation that we implement here at the legislature impacts you. Thank you very much, Speaker.
Thank you. For the debate, the
Point of order, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to note that Amin Ali, Steph Brown, Sue Craig, and Matthew...
Just a second. You can ask a point of order, but I got to recognize you. Member for Toronto Danforth, on a point of order.
Why, thank you, Speaker. I'd like to recognize Amin Ali, Steph Brown, Sue Craig, Matthew Griffin from the Scarborough area NDP Youth. Welcome.
For the debate, the member for London West.
Thank you very much, Speaker. I am pleased to be able to participate in this debate this afternoon, and I want to thank the member for M.P.P and Carleton for her efforts on this issue and bringing this motion forward. Certainly, without question, New Democrats wholeheartedly agree with the first part of this motion that child care should be accessible, it should be affordable for all Ontarians, regardless of where they live in this province and regardless of their economic circumstances. And, you know, Speaker, we also recognize that independent home child care operators have an important role to play in the child care system. We know that the quality of child care is not determined solely on the basis of where the care is provided, in a home or in a center. And the member from Nepean Carleton talked about her experience with childcare. I have had a perspective on both sides, the home-based care and center-based care. When my first child was 7 months, that was before women had a year maternity, I had to return to work, and I placed him in a licensed childcare setting, the Queen's Park daycare, in fact. He had an amazing caregiver, a loving, warm, reassuring to a new parent caregiver whose name is Anne Vautour. And much later, after I had moved from Toronto to London, this is an aside, I was delighted to learn that Anne married her partner Elaine in 2001, and she was Ontario's first legal same-sex marriage. So I never had an opportunity to officially congratulate Anne on her marriage, and also to thank her for the wonderful quality of care that she provided for my son. When my second child was born in London, we faced a dilemma. We wanted a licensed childcare centre that could accommodate both children. My son was in JK at the time, and my daughter was a toddler, but nothing was available. So we were able to find an unlicensed home childcare provider right in my neighbourhood, who turned out to be absolutely wonderful. She was a warm and loving caregiver who welcomed my children into her home, and it was a wonderful experience for a parent. Her son was the same age as my son. She walked the two boys to JK, and the two boys formed a friendship that remains to this day, and in fact our two families have remained close 20 years later. So Speaker, I have nothing but positive things to say from a personal perspective about both these experiences, and I know that many people in London and across the province have shared similar positive experiences.